Hey team! All right, so homework tonight, you're going to read pages 12 through 20, and you're going to have a reading quiz tomorrow on pages 1 through 20. The other thing is we want to give you a heads up. Your work tomorrow is really going to depend on you being caught up with the reading. If you're not caught up, you're going to find it kind of difficult. So you have two really good reasons there to be prepared. So today we're going to be talking about the history of the LGBTQ plus movement. We're going to talk about Stonewall, which was a major period in the movement, and then we're going to talk about the gay men's health crisis. So this is by no means the entire history. This is just part of it. And then once we get through that, you'll have some space to read and get ready for your quiz tomorrow. So for anyone who doesn't know, I know you guys do, but for anyone who doesn't know, LGBTQ plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. The plus stands for intersex, so people who are born not fully male and not fully female. And A stands for asexual, so that's people who might have romantic feelings, but they don't really want to have a sexual relationship. And we're talking about this because Paul, the main character of our book, is out. He's accepted, but you guys know really well it has not always been that way. And it's still definitely not that way in some places. So we want to take a second and just clarify these terms for anyone who doesn't know. So lesbian means a woman who is attracted to primarily to other women. Gay is usually a man who is primarily attracted to other men, but we can say that women are gay as well. Gay kind of just tends to mean you're attracted to someone who's the same sex as you. Bisexual means that you're attracted to both someone who's the same sex as you and someone who is not. So this can really be a spectrum. You could be like, 80% attracted to people of the same sex and 20% people of the opposite sex. Like it's not a 50-50 split. Okay. Transgender is folks who were born as one sex. So maybe somebody who's born as a female with female genitalia, but really, really does not feel like a female, does not feel comfortable in that female body. So they may present as male. So that means they may dress like male. They may have, their hair cut in the ways that we perceive as male. It doesn't necessarily mean that their physical body is that as well. When folks do have surgery to make their physical body match the way that they feel inside, that is often someone who has gone through something that we call transition. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about there. So if you're curious about that, we can talk about, kind of how that process works. And then queer, just to be clear, is like people who don't really want to identify as, fully bisexual, fully gay, fully lesbian. These are folks who aren't necessarily totally male and or totally female. They're like somewhere in between. So they might be gender nonconforming. They might not really know. They might just care about, the person and not what their physical body looks like. So queer is really the term for folks who feel like they don't fit in one of these already existing kind of labels. Okay, so let's talk about the history of this movement. So you guys know for a really, really long time in our Western cultures, so that's cultures who are mostly Christian and white, being homosexual or transgender or anything that's not like a straight person who looks like the gender that they're supposed to be. If you weren't that, your best case scenario was that you would be an outcast, and your worst case scenario was that it would get you killed if you were discovered. So we want to be super clear. There are tons and tons of cultures throughout history who are really accepting of people who are not straight and people who are not gender conforming. So that means, a dude whose body is a dude but dresses like a woman, whatever. So we want to be super clear. A lot of cultures really do have that acceptance. They have terms. There's a long history of that in a lot of other places. So when we talk about this movement, we're primarily talking about like cultures that come from the US, from England, pretty Christian, pretty white. So in the US, it really started to become its own subculture for the LGBTQ community in the 1800s. So cities were a little more accepting, but it was still pretty much illegal. So you kind of had to do everything on the down low. And in 1969, there was a bar called the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay bar, famous place where people went. If you, it's what's one of those things where like if you know about it, then you're in the club, and if you didn't know it, then you probably didn't belong there. So what we've posted is a video that kind of shows you the history of what happened at Stonewall Inn. So pause this now, please, and go look at that. Okay, so you watched the video on the rise of Stonewall Inn, so now you know what happened. So after that, LGBTQ folks became much more widely accepted, and a lot of the laws that stripped their rights were overturned or repealed, or we passed new laws that explicitly gave rights to folks in that community or prohibited from discriminating against people in those communities. And one of the things that kind of happened between then and today is that in the 1980s, HIV became a crisis. So if you don't know, HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. So you can be healthy and have the virus, be HIV positive. What happens is that if you get sick, right? So if you get the flu or you get pneumonia or cancer, the HIV virus makes it harder for your body to fight that illness. And then over time, that turns into AIDS, which means that your immune system, the part of your body that protects you from getting sick, is failing. So in the 1980s, HIV really was just like a crisis in the country, similar to what we're experiencing now with coronavirus, though obviously not quite on the same scale. And the issue with this was that HIV was really commonly linked to gay men because of the way that sex works in those relationships. And so people really thought that it was like, quote unquote, a gay disease. And there was a lot of stigma around that. People did not want to even touch folks who were gay. But what we now know is that it can be transmitted through straight sex, and it can be transmitted through blood. So a lot of the people who became HIV positive in the 1980s are people that needed transfusions because they had a disease. Maybe they were drug users and they shared a needle with somebody. It was entirely possible to be like a straight cisgendered person who happened to just come in contact with blood that was HIV positive, and they became HIV positive as well. All right, so that's a lot. We're almost done. So as you guys know, there are a ton of reasons why folks in the LGBTQ community have not been accepted. That can be because of law, like we talked about. It can be because of health, like we talked about. It can be because religion prohibits it. I grew up Baptist, and folks in my church definitely believe that it was wrong. So we want to be clear that Paul, our main character in the book, is really accepted by his family and friends. But this book has multiple characters who are LGBTQ. It has multiple men who are gay. It has a trans character. And everybody has a different experience. Not everybody is as accepted as Paul is. And you will find that out as we go forward reading. So I just want you to take a second and think to yourself, like, do you think this book could have been published 50 years ago? Like, Could a book that had multiple LGBTQ characters, including a trans character, and where that was totally fine, do you think that could have been published in 1970? Just take a second, think about that for yourself. Okay, so that's it for today. So you want to make sure that you've watched the video on the Stonewall riots, and then you can go ahead and read your next pages so that you're ready for your reading quiz.